All right, let's dive into one of the biggest what if stories in all of tech. We're talking about a battle that literally defined the future of the personal computer. It's a story about a powerful partnership that just completely blew up into this massive rivalry. And believe it or not, it's the reason why, right now, you're almost certainly using a computer that runs Windows.
I mean, seriously, have you ever stopped to ask why? Why Windows? Today, it feels like it was just inevitable, right? But if you go back to the late 80s, early 90s, oh man, it was a completely different story. The outcome was not certain at all. In fact, there was another incredibly powerful contender ready to snatch that crown.
And the answer? Well, it's basically one of the greatest business dramas of all time. You've got this epic clash between the established giant, the king of computing, IBM, and this young, super hungry, and, let's be honest, strategically brilliant upstart called Microsoft. But here's the twist. This whole saga, it doesn't start with them as enemies. It starts with them as partners. Okay, so let's jump in our time machine and go back to the mid-1980s. You have to understand the world of personal computing was on the verge of a huge leap forward. And both of these companies, IBM and Microsoft, they knew they couldn't do it alone. They absolutely needed each other.
So, back then, the undisputed king was DOS. You know, that black screen with the blinking cursor. It was simple, it worked, but it was really limited. Like, it could only do one single thing at a time. The problem was this amazing new hardware was coming out, specifically Intel's 8286 processor, that had all these incredible new powers that DOS just couldn't touch. There was this huge gap, and everyone knew a much more advanced OS was needed, like yesterday. And the holy grail, the key technology everyone was chasing, was something called protected mode. Now, what is that? Well, it was the magic trick that would finally let a computer run multiple programs at the same time. And even more importantly, it meant that if one of those programs crashed, and you know they did, it wouldn't take the entire computer down with it. This wasn't just some small upgrade, this was literally the foundation for how we use computers today. So that's the setup. In 1985, these two giants ink a deal to build the future. The project was called OS/2 for Operating Systems/2. And, you know, progress was happening. It was steady, maybe a little slow, but steady. The first version dropped in 87, and it was still just text-based. But then in late 88, OS/2 1.1 shows up, and this time it has a full-on graphical interface, the Presentation Manager. It really seemed like the future was right on schedule.
But here's where things start to get complicated. While all eyes were on the main event, on OS2, Microsoft had this other thing going on. A little side project, something way less ambitious. But as it turns out, something that was about to become way, way more disruptive. Yeah, that side project? It was called Windows. And I gotta tell you, in the beginning, nobody took it seriously. I mean, Windows 1.0 came out in 1985 and it was, well, it was a dog. It was so slow. The New York Times had this amazing line. They said, using it was like pouring molasses in the Arctic. I mean, come on. Everyone just saw it as a toy, not a real player. So you really had these two completely different philosophies at play. On one hand, you had OS/2. That was the heir apparent, right? It was designed to be a total replacement for DOS, a brand new engine built from the ground up for the future. And then you had Windows. It wasn't a new engine at all. It was just a pretty paint job, a graphical shell that sat right on top of good old DOS. It was the scrappy underdog for sure. But even way back in 1987, some really smart people were starting to see the game Microsoft was playing. Check out this quote from Computer World. They basically called it, Microsoft was competing against itself. Think about it. It was brilliant. If the world went with a super powerful next-gen OS/2, Microsoft wins. If the world decided to stick with the simpler DOS-based Windows, Microsoft still wins. They had all their bases covered. And that incredible strategic position is exactly what set the stage for the big one, the dramatic turning point. Because in 1990, this alliance, this partnership, it didn't just get a little shaky, it completely shattered. We're talking about one of the biggest, messiest business divorces in the history of tech. So what was the final straw? Two words, Windows 3.0. When it was released in 1990, it wasn't just a success, it was a phenomenon, a massive runaway freight train of a hit. It sold over 3 million copies in its first year alone. All of a sudden, Microsoft's little side project, yeah, it wasn't on the side anymore. It was the main event. Now look, the success of Windows 3.0 was definitely the final nail in the coffin, but the partnership was already in big trouble. It really boiled down to a fundamental conflict. IBM was a hardware company. Their whole goal was to sell their PS2 computers, and OS2 was the special key to unlock that kingdom. But Microsoft, they were a software company. They didn't care who built the PC, they just wanted their software running on every single one of them. You throw in a culture clash. IBM's big, slow bureaucracy versus Microsoft's fast and loose style, and, well, this thing was doomed from the start.
And that was it. The breakup was official. The battle lines were drawn in the sand. Microsoft put all its chips on Windows, and IBM was left holding the bag, trying to develop OS/2 all by itself. The Great War for the desktop was on.
But don't think for a second that IBM just rolled over. No way. They came out swinging. In 1992, they launched OS/2 version 2.0, and their marketing slogan was just incredibly bold. They were telling the world that OS/2 was a better DOS than DOS and a better Windows than Windows. I mean, talk about throwing down the gauntlet. That was a direct shot at Microsoft.
And you know what? On paper, IBM was right. OS/2 2.0 was a beast. It was a true 32-bit system, which was a huge deal back then. It had preemptive multitasking, which basically means the OS was a smart traffic cop, keeping everything running smoothly and stable. Windows, meanwhile, was still 16-bit and used cooperative multitasking, which was more like asking all the programs to politely take turns, and if one misbehaved, the whole system could just freeze up. Technologically, there was no contest. OS/2 was way superior. But look at that last row on the chart. Driver support. That, right there, was Windows' secret weapon.
And that one single advantage, that massive support for all kinds of hardware, when you combine that with Microsoft's incredible market momentum and their killer business strategy, well, that's what was going to decide the whole war.
So you gotta be asking, how did the better product lose so badly? Well, let's break it down. First, that driver problem we just talked about. You'd go out and buy a new printer or a sound card, and you could bet it would work with Windows. OS/2? Total crapshoot. Second, the power of the bundle. Microsoft made sure that if you bought a new PC, it came with Windows already on it. Most people never even had a choice to make. Third, IBM's marketing was just, a mess. Remember OS/2 Warp? Yeah, nobody really knew what it meant. And finally, IBM itself got distracted. They started this other huge project and took their eye off the ball with OS/2.
And then came Windows 95. Honestly, the launch of Windows 95 wasn't even the final battle. It was the victory lap. By that point, the war was long over. That great partnership that was supposed to build the future of computing, it ended with one partner not just winning, but achieving total, complete dominance of the desktop. A dominance that lasted for decades and literally shaped the digital world that you and I live in today.
So it all leaves us with this one big, fascinating question. Was OS/2 just a superior product that lost a marketing war? A classic case of the best tech not winning? Or was Windows' simpler, good enough approach, combined with Microsoft's absolutely ruthless business strategy, always going to win in the end? It's that timeless battle, isn't it? Technical perfection versus what the market actually wants. And the lessons from this war, they're still being talked about in boardrooms today.